Okay. So with your, can you just first just say what your degree was, how you got into it, and we'll just chat about it from there.
Sure. I have a bachelor's in business administration management, and an MBA. I I am almost 39, and I say that because I went to college right out of high school, and expected to do really well based on my high school experience, and did not. I had undiagnosed ADHD for my entire life,
Oh, okay.
and I think a lack of structure really contributed to my not being able to handle a traditional college experience at 18. Um, so I it took me 15 years to get an associate's degree, one class at a time, literally one class at a time. I paid for one class, one every semester. Some semesters I had to skip because I couldn't afford it. But I just kept showing up until somebody said, "Hey, did you know you have enough credits to graduate?"
Oh, really?
um, yes. And um, I, for a little while, was not really proud of that degree. It felt a little bit like, who takes 15 years to get a 2 year degree?
Yeah.
Um,
And was
and
this just to make sure I understand it, you would do like, I mean, there's about 40 classes in a semester, right? Or in a bachelor's degree usually, and you've got a 2 year degree, so that'd be about 20 classes. So you did one class at a time every like spring. Were you doing like spring I'd do a class, fall I'd do a class, and you'd skip some in
I
between until
tried,
you got an associate's?
yeah, basically,
Okay,
basically.
okay.
I know that there were years that I probably was not taking any classes. But then I had my daughter, and I ended up graduating with my associates when she was 6, I think.
Okay.
Um, so there were like, when she was young, there was a semester that a friend of mine babysat my daughter so that I could go to an anatomy lab. And there were
Oh,
times my husband had to come home. He had to make sure that he was home on that night because I had a night class. There was one semester that she basically entertained herself because I had to teach myself statistics.
that's
So
that's a hard thing to teach yourself.
yes, it was a hybrid class. You did all of the coursework at home, and then you went in for a lab 1 or 2 nights a week to basically prove that you had done the work,
Hmm.
um, and to ask questions of the instructor. So those were tough times. And I remember being surprised when the counselor at the community college said, "You have enough credits to graduate this semester. Did you know that?" And I was like, "No, I didn't. I
Yeah.
just kept showing up." Um, so fast forward several years, I owned a business. It provided me a full time income. I basically worked at home. I had a lot of flexibility. I could volunteer at my kids' school. I could do all of the things. And I was, earning a full time income. I felt really great about that. It was retail based. And so January, June, July are very slow months.
Yeah.
I just decided, oh, I'll just sub at my kid's school in like January, February when things are kind of slow, just to
Yeah.
kind of help out. And I can earn a little money when retail is slow. And then 2023 happened. um, my business was, like based on people's discretionary income, and
Yeah.
inflation happened and all of that stuff. And I lost some wholesale accounts. I had some stores that closed because they couldn't afford to stay open. Um, and it was just a perfect storm of things. I ended up taking a long term sub job in my district and never left. I took a the job for eighth grade math in October, and I was there until the last day of school. That was 2 school years ago.
Okay.
Um, So that is a very long way of saying now I teach seventh grade science.
Okay.
uh, so that is kind of like how I got here. When I was doing the long-term sub, WGU is partnering with districts around the country because we need teachers.
Yeah.
And my principal let me go to that meeting, even though I wasn't technically an employee. I was just like
Oh,
a
who are you subbing through, by the way?
contract.
Was it a, what company
My
was it?
my district doesn't use a company. We just it's like
Oh,
it's yeah.
yeah.
So my principal let me go to that meeting, and I was like, I would really like to get my bachelor's degree. I don't really want to get it in education. I love what I do, but I also love business. And I also really don't intend to stay in education forever.
Okay.
And that kind of like I cast a vision, maybe. And at that time, I didn't really understand about accelerating. My enrollment counselor is actually the person that was like, you could do this a lot faster than traditional schooling. And because I have ADHD, I was like, oh, I can hyper focus on this thing. And that's what I did.
Yeah.
So I finished my bachelor's degree in 100-ish days.
Wow.
And I mean,
And do you, I mean, I know it might be a little bit, but do you know how much transferred over from your associates to Western Gov? Because I went to transfer my I wanted to see what a bachelor's in entrepreneurship would transfer over as to an entrepreneurship degree, or sorry, entrepreneurship to bachelor's of business administration. And they were like, yeah, that's 30% of the credits. And I was like, I have a full bachelor's. And they went, yeah, that's only 30% of our business degree. So I was like, oh,
I
that's,
mean, that
it made
sucks.
me, yeah, that was
It
bad. So
sucks. I have a
did your
full
associates
bachelor's
like,
degree. I
yeah,
feel like mine was about 30%, but I mean, I guess I would have expected that for a 2-year degree. But
yeah,
that stinks. I
like,
had a 4-year degree.
yeah, I mean, it was good I wasn't getting my bachelor's. Like I got the MBA, but I was just
Yeah.
curious, like if like because some of my friends stopped doing college, and I was like, well, if you wanted to switch degrees or you wanted to like take it and move it over here, what would it look like? And we go and look at it, and it's like, yeah, 30% for a bachelor's. I was like, what are you talking about, man? Like
Right.
it's a business degree. But yeah,
Yes. Yeah, it was about 30%. I had a lot of classes to complete. And I had an associate's in science, not the associates in arts. Like I had done a lot of the math classes and things like that that um I think gave me a good foundation
yeah,
um for getting a bachelor's degree. And I did it over the summer. I was at home. School was out,
yeah,
and I was like, I'm just going to hyper focus on this. And I did. And I wasn't intending to go work back in the school. I had told the principal, hey, I'm done. I think I can switch my business to like DTC. I had a pretty loyal customer base that was like retail, that would purchase from me retail. And I just found out that I really don't prefer that. I don't want to
oh
deal with all the shipping and the customer service and the social media and all that stuff. And I wasn't at the time making enough money to pay somebody to do the parts that I didn't want to do. So
yeah,
switching to retail, and not worrying about wholesale distribution was just too much for me. So my principal called over the summer and said, I could really use your help. And I ended up splitting a class with a retired teacher while they tried to find someone, and that never happened. And so I became the full-time teacher when I got my degree, when I got my bachelor's, which was in September of last year.
okay. And
So
then did you say you have an MBA as well? You
I
said that?
do. So yeah,
Okay.
I sit, not even 12 months later from finishing my bachelor's degree, and I've also finished my master's.
And how long did the
So
master's take you?
it took me a full term. I was 19 days short of my term ending.
That's
So
about how fast I did it. It's even though you have some room, it's like, wow, this is
yeah.
close, man. Like,
Yes, I thought I saw other people who had done it so quickly, and I thought, I mean, I finished that bachelor's so fast, but and I love business and I consume like venture capital news as a hobby. This will be a piece of
okay,
cake. And it was rigorous. Just because I finished it quickly does not mean that it was not rigorous. I hope
yeah.
that I never have to do bond and debt valuations ever again.
Yeah, those are awful.
They were
Yeah, we had,
awful. Never.
uh, yeah, I can't remember what class. There were a few where it was like, okay, a week or two. And I worked in investments and in like regulatory compliance with FINRA, doing stuff for Fidelity Investments and Wells Fargo. And so there was one class where I was like, dude, this was my job every day. And I flew through that. And then
Right.
I got to, I think it was weird, like supply. I was like, oh, supply chain. Like I know some stuff about, I didn't know anything about supply chain. And I
Right.
I just got told, like, you just have no idea what class is just gonna stop you in your tracks, and you're like, okay, we're going on,
Yes.
six, and obviously it's way faster than than doing like five classes a term or a semester to
Yeah.
get through it. But you still hit those ones where you're like, dude, I'm gonna rip my hair out. I have no idea what this is talking about. And you just got
Right.
to figure out the test and get through it. I mean, it's rough, but it's wild that you're like, yeah, I did my bachelor's, because a lot of people, that's all, like I see on that accelerators page, people are, I think the average age of a Western governor's student is around 38 years old, from what one of the counselors told me. And a lot of people are like, I need my bachelor's, and then they're done. So it's interesting that you went like, no, bachelor's, and like within a year, like you said, you were already done with a master's. What was WGU's transition like for you? Do you feel like they pressured that and wanted you to do it, or were you like, you know what, dude, I'm on fire. I'm just gonna like get the MBA right after.
I came into BGU knowing that I wanted an MBA because of my undiagnosed ADHD. Um, I had heard my whole life things like I'm a procrastinator. I wait until the last minute to do things, that I will be late for my own funeral. Just like things that had to end, and having a traditional college experience at 18 where I wasn't successful had really made me feel like, well, I just have to prove these people wrong. I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
and so I came into it knowing that I wanted an MBA. And, you know, I hear people on the internet talk about an MBA is not, doesn't give you an ROI unless it's from a an Ivy. And I'm like, I mean, let me just stop you right there, because here's what I'm going to tell you. First of all, nobody cares about your opinion unless you are down here doing it. Okay, so if you don't have an
yeah,
MBA, I mean, I know someone who had an MBA from an Ivy, and they would never say that to me.
yeah. Oh yeah,
Secondly, I paid $4,000 for my master's degree. So, I could go get an entry level job and it would be worth the ROI.
yeah, exactly. Like I
So,
was making, I think I made 70K at my last job. I had a bachelor's for about 2 years, and it's so like it's really hard to be like, how does the bachelor's help you? It's like, well, you relate to people easier, you can talk to people about different things. I like saying like, oh, it's just a piece of paper. It's like, sure, but I mean, I can relate to the managers better. I can talk about different activities I did during it. I can talk about working and going to school at the same time. So there's a lot of stuff where it's like, yeah, I mean, they didn't teach me that in whatever, in statistics 304 or whatever it was, but during that class you pick up a lot of stuff where you're drawing on it without even knowing it, and it's helping you, right? Like there's there's
absolutely.
all kinds of job stuff that helps you out. Like I was making 70, and then right after the masters, and it says it on WGU, it's like the average MBA grad has an 80K salary within the first year or two. And I was like, okay, we'll see. I got 70K. The next job, like a month after I got the MBA, it was 85K base just immediately. And that has its own commissions. And I've also run into other, because this job's given me flexibility, I've run into another opportunity where still checking it out, but they're like my year end, the first year after the masters could be double what it was before. And it's like, oh, it doesn't have an ROI. It's like, dude, it was an ROI in the first month. Like you spend four or
I
five
mean,
grand on it. Yeah. It's like I spent 4 grand on a degree and got a 15K pay raise. That's the ROI.
yes.
It tripled its value. Like it's, even if it
Yes.
only did it the one time or whatever, I mean, what does it matter?
Right.
Like if it was just for that year, it still made sense, even if it only gave me that benefit that year. It's like I
Uh-huh.
tripled $5,000 worth of value. So when people are like, it's not worth it, or that it doesn't carry the same weight or whatever, it's like, dude, I don't know what to tell you. If we compare W-2s, how close are they? Like it's not
I mean,
it's not that big of a thing, right?
I yeah, I think I mean I tell kids all day long when they say when are we ever going to use this, and I'm like, I mean I could give you a million ways that you're going to use this, but at a bare minimum, perseverance is a life skill, and
Yeah.
working at a thing that you don't enjoy is a life skill. Working on a thing that you find challenging is something that you will use in your life. But I tell people about WGU, I mean, it's really cheap if you can go fast. If
Yeah.
you intend to take the same amount of time that you would at a traditional university, then it's not going to be less.
Yeah.
Um,
It's going to be
well,
the same thing.
maybe it'll be less. I'm in a graduate program right now to get my full teaching license. And
Yeah.
I said to my program director, do I really only have to, I can only take 2 classes a semester, really? Because
Yeah.
I think I could get this done faster.
Yeah. And they won't let you. It's like, dude, I
No.
think other universities are catching on to it, luckily. And they're like at UVU, where I got my bachelor's, an MBA was about all you could get. And now they've built a whole school. I graduated in 20, so it's been about 4 years. And every year I see some update about their master's degree, because they're
Mhm.
like, well, now it's accelerated. Now most of it's online. Now you can get it within a year. And a lot of these schools are, I think, catching on to experiential stuff where you like, in my case, I wrote off my capstone for my bachelor's and a business formation class because I had started my own business and I had done a bunch of other stuff. And so it was like that I went to my professor. I said, dude, I've already done this and I've got like 8 classes left. I don't want to split it. And he goes, well, we could write 3 of them off because you've already done it. And I was like, there we go. That's the mentality that, because so many people get stuck on the little speed bumps of life. And it's like, look, you could just do the class faster. Like you, when you're
Mhm.
waiting and you're like, I mean, I'm sure you experienced this getting your bachelor or your associate's degree. Like you're doing one class at a time. It's almost so slow that like the slowness of the class is what's stopping you from getting the degree, not like the difficulty of the material. And so the
Right.
flexibility of WGU compared to other universities, it's like, look, this guy can figure out statistics. You just need to let him figure out statistics on his own schedule
Mhm.
for 2 weeks. You can't be like, well, if you're not here Wednesday at 10:15 a.m., it's like, how's he going to work and do that? Or he's going to go
Right.
into a ton of debt so that his
Mhm.
schedule is free to do that. And it's ridiculous. So I mean, the fact that you blew through it that fast, I think a lot of people have that story of like, hey, here I had a block, like I got let go from my job and I had a month where I just went through all these
Mhm.
classes, right? You had that
Yep.
teaching thing. With the
Mhm.
master's degree, do you feel like you went slower? I mean, it doesn't sound like you took any kind of hiatus. Was was it like you were teaching school, and when did you do the MBA during that time?
It was tough,
Yeah.
to say the least.
Yeah.
Yes, I was teaching full time. Um, I I was teaching full time without a lot of support from colleagues. And in education, we have these things called professional learning communities. And it's the idea is that you get together with teachers who are teaching the same subject that you are. Now, this is less of a thing in high school, but it's in elementary and middle. Um, and you kind of plan. And so all of you are kind of in the same, I don't know, you're on the same topics, you're doing kind of the same thing. Um, and I do not go along to get along. I am not going to do the same thing that we've always done just because that's how we've always done it. And
Yeah.
so I didn't have a lot of support because the person who was leading my PLC wanted me to fall in line, and I was like, no, thank you.
Yeah.
So I was not only was I teaching full time, but I was planning my own content on my own, which is not a thing that we typically put on first year teachers because we want to keep them. Um,
Yeah.
and doing
Well,
my
that's a
own,
lot more work to do that, right? Like putting your
it
own
was it was a lot.
packet together is a lot. Plus,
It
you're
was a
doing the
lot
MBA
more
at the
work.
same time.
And I work at a STEM school, so we don't do a lot
Mm,
of direct instruction. It's a lot of experience. But I structured my classroom like WGU. I told them that when we did our human body unit, I was like, you guys are going to med school. You have to master every body system. You have to master one before you can move on to the next one. And you're going to go at your own pace. But I set guardrails for them just to kind of teach them time management. And it was so much fun to see them get into it and really take control of their learning. I think WGU is for a certain kind of student. And
yeah.
it worked really well for me because I want you to just get out of my way and let me do
Yeah. I
it.
totally get that. I mean, I've got family that did it. Like my brother-in-law, he did it
Mhm.
in 4 months, his whole bachelor's, and it was in IT. And then my other brother tried it and he got 4 classes in and stopped and he was done with WGU. And I'm like, yeah, that's an expensive 4 classes, but but I mean it just is like some people it's dry. It's a dry experience. It's really hard. And if you don't have that, I mean, you have the like the life experience you got. It's interesting because you could have done it slow and gone 4 years for a bachelor's, 4 years for a master's, took you, and it could have taken you a long time, but you're doing blocks, but you're just doing them more spread out. But I think you had the idea of like the fact that you did one class at a time for and got your associates that way, like you understand what it's like to drag it out. And that skill alone of like I'm not doing that. That's not something a lot of 18 to 25-year-olds have. And I think that's why a lot of kids will do. You hear a ton of people, I couldn't finish my degree. I couldn't finish my degree. And when they did finish their degree, I mean, for me, it was a lot of luck because I got into a special student government reimbursement program where they reimbursed a little part of it. I was able to live in my parents' basement for a year while I was doing that. And I could do my own business when I wanted. And like if I had to pay rent and afford a car and my own insurance and all that, I mean, there's so many ways you're just completely screwed out of getting your education. Or if you're like, fine, I'll go along, I'll get the loans, I'll take out 200K to do this, then you're paying that off for the rest of your life. Like 200K when your job is 60K out of college is like, I don't know how people are doing it. And they might only take out 80K, but then they're like, well, I'll save for a little bit. I want to buy a house, blah, blah, blah. And that 60K with interest turns into 120K within a few years. Now you're up at 150. Now you're going to 200. And it's like for a little degree like that, it's like, what was the difference? Well, WGU grads, they made a little bit less. It's like, yeah, but they had a fraction of the debt and a fraction of the time commitment. And it's like, it doesn't make it makes sense to go to a university depending on what you're doing. But if it's like a business management degree, just I've tried to talk people out. Like I've talked a couple friends into doing it, and most guys that I like help navigate, it's 5 months, 6 months, and they're done.
Mhm.
But some people are just like, no, I'm not. Like my sister told me the other day, no, I want a real degree, and I'm like, what do you mean? Like what? Like I get what you mean. I mean a traditional experience, but what do you mean by it has to be real? And like the differences in the real world 40 years after graduation, what does that look like going down the roads? And I don't think it's that like it's negligible how different it is between Western Gov and like a traditional university. And
Mhm.
I'm curious, I don't think you said what was your business that you ran while you were doing your associates with retail?
I made jewelry and home goods and
Mm,
distributed it through small other mostly small female owned boutiques across North Carolina and South Carolina. Um,
Oh, okay.
I I mean, I really prefer that. I would rather move a large volume for half the money than have to do all of the, like I said, shipping and
Yeah.
customer service and marketing and all that stuff to move it for less. And I when I got my first store, when I had my first like contract with someone and they started posting about my product on social media, then I mean, it was just kind of like a snowball effect
Yeah.
from there. And I do relate to people very easily. And I think that that helped me build some business relationships. But that came like after my associates. I don't know. I graduated when my daughter was 6 with my associate's degree. She still remembers it. She asked me
Oh,
after I got
yeah.
my master's if I had my associate somewhere. And I was like, honestly, I don't even know. And I did tell her, she's 13 now. I wasn't proud of that degree when I got it. I I didn't have the same circumstances that she will have going to college. I was on my own. Um,
Yeah.
so I left for my 4-year college and failed out and came home for a summer, and that was it. That was the last time I have lived with my parents. I mean, I've been on my own
Yeah.
for my entire adult life. And so getting my associates one class at a time was a function of money or lack of. And, but the fact that I kept going back was a function of the support that I had at home. Because I could have had a husband that was like, seriously, why are you doing this? This is so dumb. Instead, he
Sure.
was like, yeah, I'll be home. I will make sure that I'm home from work so that you can go to class. And so when I think what kept me from wanting to get a bachelor's or really from seriously pursuing getting a bachelor's was the money, because traditional university is so expensive. And the time, I was like, when am I going to have time to finish whatever's left of a bachelor's degree? And when my enrollment counselor told me there's a group on Facebook called WGU Accelerators, and you should join. Like, people are in there just finishing degrees in 3 months. And I was like, for real?
Yeah.
That
No, it's
was
true. I mean, it's a complete game changer. And one thing too that I noticed that kind of ticked me off about just traditional university is like I would get so I was in student government at a small campus in Utah, and it was there were only 300 students on campus. And I was going through and I was like, well, what like let me see a breakdown of tuition. And it was like, okay, you got to pay 500, or you got to pay like $300-400 in books. Why? Why aren't these virtual? Like, I get it, there's costs, but you're telling me I got to spend like how many ever hundreds of dollars for books every year, and I can't read through these books as fast as I can. I've got to buy 3 books. They're 100 and something each, so I'm spending like call it $300-400 on books, and you can get used and whatever, but they update them enough that it outpaces it. And
Mhm.
then I was like, okay, well, what's this fee? And it's like, oh, student services. It's like a $300-400 charge. And I'm like, we plan a pizza party once a semester, or like and then we charge them to come to those activities. And it's
Mhm.
like, what was that student fee for? And you go break down all these things about college, and like what you were saying about it being expensive. It's like it's expensive, but if we bare bonesed it like you do at um if you do the bare bones of it at Western Gov, where they're like, look, you just read. If you know it, you know it. We have professors that are there if you need them, not there if you don't. I mean, then you get it down to where it's like, okay, now this is manageable. But universities, like, I mean, UVU is way cheap. It was like 4 or 5 grand a semester, but then you got to live there. Okay. Then you've got to, you got to pay for books, you got to pay for student services, and you got to pay for like, oh, well, you're on campus, so you got to buy this, and there's these games, and you got to go buy that. It's like half of the college experience isn't even about school. It's about the experience of being on campus, and it's ridiculous. It's super inflated, and half of the cost isn't even like a justifiable. It's like, well, I mean, you got to do these books. I know it's a pain, but you got to do it. Like, there's literally
That's
no
the way that
reason.
it's always been done. I
Yeah.
find traditional university, especially for adult and non-traditional students, to be inherently elitist. I
Yes.
don't have time for that. I don't have the money for that. And you know what? I don't need that college experience. Or the social part. Like that's
Yeah.
already, I'm good. Just give me the information. And I saw people in the MBA group on Facebook who were completing their degrees in 20 days. And
Oh
I was
yeah,
like,
those guys are psychos.
it's
Good for
amazing.
you. Good for you. Can't do it.
It's amazing. I instead I spent every Saturday at the library and cried most evenings.
Dude, I remember one, it's like 4 in the morning, and I was like,
Yes.
oh,
Yes, yes. I when
oh,
I graduated, I was like, oh, I might have to go to the library and let them know that I'm done and I won't be back so that they don't wonder where I am because I
yeah,
was there every Saturday in my little corner
yeah,
most of the day. And I would try to come home from school and do homework, but I was tapped out. I was done by then, and my daughter has extracurriculars and all that stuff. I did most of my work on the weekends.
yeah. I was telling my wife, I was like, the whole thing, I got it between 10 p.m. and 4 a.m. And I don't know what it was, but during the day, I could not do it. I was like,
Mhm.
no. But when it's night, I was just like, I was a night owl. Uh, no, but I just went through it and I was like at night for some reason I was just laser focused and like the marketing paper for the MBA is like 12 pages. That was like just wrap it out, submit it,
Yeah.
see what gets canceled. That's another thing I like about WGU is, there's all these like a lot of professors in traditional universities, they just don't have enough time to grade everything. Like they're overloaded too. A lot of the traditional universities, they're like, I know, guys, I had some time off. It's going to take me another week or two to get your paper. Like the fact that WGU is just always running like this huge machine. There's always a professor. There's always an advisor. Like I mean, and the advisors can take 2 week vacations, and I'm like, okay, I'll call your backup advisor, and
Mhm.
you'll push the class through for me. Like there's so many little inefficiencies in a traditional university where it was like, dude, I didn't do anything this week because my professor was sick or, the test was this or the TA didn't grade that. WGU is like, I want you to be done with this. And they want it to be accelerated. Like they want, like the fact that the advisor, I never had somebody at UVU go, hey, you should go to this group where they like figure out
Right?
statistics. They were like, you better
Yes.
go in at 10 a.m. on a Saturday and hope that the professor can completely resolve all your questions. It's like,
Right.
well, I
I
can't
mean,
make it. Does
it's
he have
so
YouTube? No, he does
fatalist.
not. Like, oh, yeah,
Nobody is encouraging you to. The other thing is, at a traditional university, people are like, C's get degrees. That's why bachelor's degrees don't matter, or whatever. Like
yeah,
you can do the bare minimum and pass. At WGU, if you turn in a paper that is not exactly right, it's going to get returned.
yeah.
And
My brother's getting him kicked back. Like he thought he could do that. He thought he could get
right?
away with it. And his first paper, boom, came
No.
back. It's like, you need to fix this, 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 this. And just what, and he was like,
Yeah.
Spence, I need your help. He calls me. He's like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm like, you need to freaking write it like they want it.
Yes.
And, like I'd look at some of his sections. I'm like, dude, this is a joke. You should have figured, like, you cannot write things. It can't, when you ask, like, hey, what are the differences ethically and morally about this policy? And he goes, yeah, there's ethics and morals in business. I'm like, that's all you wrote, dude. And I was like, it's freaking embarrassing. And then he went back and he, wrote his paragraphs like he's supposed to and didn't get him kicked back. And I was like, all right, this is good. Like I remember one class we had, it was, it was called an entrepreneurship lecture series. And you watched an hour of an entrepreneurship lecture, and then you had to write a one-page paper response. And it took the whole thing. It took the whole semester for me to do that because you have to watch it on set, and they were pre-recorded. the teacher wouldn't unlock the video until the next Saturday. So I'm
Mhm.
writing a paper every Saturday for 1 credit. I'm like, okay, now looking back, I could watch it on double speed. I could write the paper. I could write the 12 pages and watch all those videos and be done with that class in 6 hours on one Saturday and just be done.
Mhm.
And you could argue like, well, you don't retain as much, blah, blah. It's like, well, dude, what do I like? What do I know watching something for an hour and then doing it like an hour at a time, like
Mhm. Mhm.
that happens nonstop at traditional things. I'm curious
Right.
like how it compared for you doing an associate's and taking that long. Like, did you have any resentment to the associate's program, or were you like, oh my gosh, I can't believe, I did it that way versus this? What was
I
your
mean,
experience comparing those?
I remember that I asked my enrollment counselor, I don't have to do discussion boards, right? Because I just I hated them. Um, and I also hated having to wait on other people who were going to do the bare minimum. I was taking so long because those were the circumstances of my life. If my life had been different, then it wouldn't have taken me that long. And I was there to learn. I was there to get it done, and waiting on these people who have all the time in the world. I was like, I just again get out of the way and let me do it. And that's what
Yeah,
WGU did for me, for both of my degrees. So,
yeah. No, yeah, um having those discussion boards, I started thinking about all the ones I did and just I think that WGU students do more in those accelerator groups than you would ever do in a traditional university, just trying to help each other. Like,
mm,
I will write paragraphs to somebody about how to make it through this statistics class or how to get through the capstone. I mean, I have spent hours helping people after my degree and
mm,
during my degree. And I guarantee I put more time in just trying to help out than I ever did doing discussion boards and why don't you talk to your team and how about everybody does a brainstorm on how to write this paper? It's like they were all just such forced and impersonal assignments. And when
yes,
you get in there on the groups and like what we're doing, right? Like we're like, no, this is how you do it. This is how you help someone through. This is how you do the tests. This is how you write a paper. Like all of that it's just way more thrilling and like, oh, dude, I want to help my fellow student.
yeah.
And traditional, you're not getting that at all.
No, I think WGU successful students at WGU, because not everybody is successful. This model is not for everybody, but
Yeah,
um, there's a lot of buy-in. There's just a lot of buy-in from everybody, and I think that that's what makes it so special. I mean, there are two other women at my school. One of them just graduated, and a second is in the middle of her degree, who are getting degrees at WGU besides me.
yeah, that's
It's
awesome.
amazing for a working professional who has the knowledge and the life experience and the ambition.
Yeah, I think I mean, it's obviously a great program, and I think your experience is going to help a lot of people out. Um, I, I guess I have to buy the Zoom thing sometime soon because it's going to cut our meeting off here in a
Right?
second. But I mean, I think we've covered a ton, and
Yeah.
I think that this is really going to be helpful for people. So I appreciate you chatting with me, and I'll message you on on Facebook, and if I find out anything else for you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.